The first time Logan hit her, he cried. It had been a mistake, he'd said, his hands shaking as they hovered over her swollen cheek. Hazel had sat on the cold floor, tasting blood in her mouth, staring up at the man she loved. His blue eyes were wide with regret, his lips trembling with whispered apologies. I didn't mean to, Logan had said, his voice cracking. You know that, right? You made me so mad. She had nodded, because what else could she do? That was a year ago. Now Hazel knew better. Logan's love was a storm, calm one moment, raging the next. A clenched fist, a whispered threat. A door slammed so hard the walls trembled. And Hazel, once fearless, once wild, had learned how to shrink, how to silence herself, how to make herself small enough to survive. Tonight, she tried to do just that. They sat in the dim glow of the kitchen, the silence stretching between them like a blade. The air was thick, suffocating. As Logan swirled the whiskey in his glass, the ice clinking softly. Hazel could feel it coming, the storm. You were flirting with him, Logan muttered. Hazel tensed. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. I wasn't. Logan's knuckles whitened against the glass. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. His jaw twitched. He leaned back in his chair, watching her with those sharp, calculating eyes, the kind of look that made her stomach twist into knots. That bartender, Logan said, voice slow, deliberate. The one at dinner, I saw the way he looked at you. He was just being polite. Polite? Logan's laugh was humorless. Is that what we're calling it now? Hazel's throat was dry. Please, Logan, I don't want to fight. His fingers drummed against the table. That sound, it sent a shiver up her spine. She had learned to recognize the signs, the tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing changed. This was a game to him, a slow, cruel game of control. Fight? Logan echoed. Hazel, sweetheart, I don't want to fight either. I just want the truth, that's all. I've told you the truth, she whispered. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. It pressed down on her, filled the room, choked the air from her lungs. Then, bang. His whiskey glass shattered against the wall. Hazel jumped, her breath hitching in her throat. Shards of glass rained onto the floor, glinting under the dim light. Logan was on his feet before she could move. You think I don't see it? He hissed, advancing toward her. You think I don't see the way men look at you? The way you let them? No, Hazel whispered, backing away. Logan, please. But his hand lashed out. Pain exploded across her cheek. Her head snapped to the side. The taste of blood returned, familiar now like a cruel memory resurfacing. Another blow, and another. Hazel fell, her knees hitting the cold tile. Her vision blurred, the world tilting. Above her, Logan loomed, his breathing ragged, his fists clenched and unclenched, as if battling some unseen force inside him. You make me do this, he murmured, voice thick with something twisted. You make me crazy, Hazel. Her body trembled. Then, something changed. The lights flickered. A whisper slithered through the room, low, breathless, not Logan's voice. Hazel, her breath hitched, the air turned icy. A shadow stretched across the ceiling, long, unnatural. Logan froze. His eyes darted around, confusion flashing across his face. Did you hear that? He muttered. Hazel could barely keep her eyes open. Darkness was swallowing her, dragging her under. The last thing she saw was the shadow moving. And then, nothing. She drifted. Darkness, no pain, no sound, just a void stretching endlessly. She should have been afraid. But something about the silence felt welcoming, safe even, until the whispers started. They came from nowhere, from everywhere. Hazel, the voice was not her own. It curled around her, slithering into the space between her thoughts. He will suffer. Her body felt weightless, trapped in the space between life and death. And somewhere in the world she had left behind, Logan's nightmare was only beginning. Meanwhile, Logan sat on the couch, hands gripping his hair. His heart was still pounding. He told himself the flickering lights were a coincidence, that the voice had been in his head. And Hazel, she had just passed out. She was fine. She had to be fine. But the air in the apartment felt wrong, heavy, suffocating. He glanced at Hazel's motionless form on the floor. Guilt prickled at the edges of his mind. He should call an ambulance. The TV turned on. Logan flinched. His gaze snapped to the screen where static hissed and writhed like a living thing. A chill ran down his spine. The remote was on the table, untouched. Then, the static shifted. A distorted image flickered across the screen. A woman. Hazel's face, but her eyes, they were black pits. The image grinned at him. Logan scrambled to his feet, his breath ragged. What the fuck? Then, the whisper came. Low, cold, I see you. Logan stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. His pulse thundered in his ears. Who's there? He snapped. Silence. But the air moved. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched, twisting unnaturally. The temperature dropped. Logan's breath came out in visible puffs. He grabbed his phone, fumbling with the screen, dialing 911. His fingers shook. The call didn't go through. Instead, the screen flickered. Incoming call from Hazel. Logan's blood ran ice cold. Slowly, his trembling finger hovered over the answer button. Then he heard it, a soft, ragged breath, right behind him. His heart stopped. He turned, body rigid with terror. Hazel was still on the floor, but something stood behind him, watching. The whisper came again, breath warm against his ear. You're mine now. The lights went out, and Logan finally understood. The nightmare was only beginning. Chapter 2. Silent Screams. Trapped between life and death, Hazel was awake, but she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't scream. She existed in the in-between, floating in a world of darkness and distant echoes. Her body was nothing but dead weight, locked in a prison of flesh that refused to obey. But she could hear the steady beep of machines, the hum of fluorescent hospital lights, the occasional murmur of voices, doctors, nurses, her mother crying softly. They spoke as if she were gone, as if she weren't right here, screaming inside her mind. But the worst part wasn't the paralysis, it was the visions. At first, they were just flickers, images slipping through the cracks of her consciousness. But as the days passed, they became sharper, more real. She saw Logan, not as he had been before, not as the man she once loved, but as something rotting, something hunted. His face appeared in her mind like a broken film reel, his hollowed eyes, his trembling hands, the sweat pooling at the base of his neck. The fear in him was palpable, clinging to his skin like an oil slick. Something was watching him, and Hazel knew without a doubt it was her, or rather, what she had become. Logan's unraveling. Logan hadn't left his apartment in days. His phone was dead. The power flickered on and off. The shadows in the corners of the room had begun to move when he wasn't looking. At first, he thought he was losing his mind. Then the voices started. It began at night, creeping in through the silence. Whispers, soft and slithering, curling against his ears as he lay frozen in bed. You did this to me? The first time he heard it, he bolted upright, sweat slicking his skin. The apartment was silent, save for the wind rattling against the windows. Then, the chair in the corner creaked. Logan's heart pounded. He stared at it, breath shallow. It had been empty before, but now, a shape sat there, not fully formed. A shadow, deep and unnatural, shifting just out of focus. He scrambled to his feet, backing away. Who's there? Silence. Then, his own voice echoed back at him. Who's there? Distorted, twisted, spoken with a mouth that wasn't his. His stomach lurched. He fumbled for the light switch, flipping it on. The chair was empty again. But Logan wasn't alone. He could feel it. Something lingered, in the walls, beneath the floorboards, in the reflection of the black TV screen, watching, waiting. And then the whispers returned. She's awake. His breath caught, his entire body went ice cold. That wasn't true. It couldn't be. Hazel was still in a coma. She was still. The thought cut off as the room went dark. A rush of static filled his ears, deafening and all-consuming. His vision blurred, and through the blackness he saw a face, Hazel, her lips twisted into an unnatural smile, her eyes empty pits of black. Then she spoke, her voice layered with something inhuman. Logan, do you miss me? The lights snapped back on. Logan stood trembling, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. The air smelled of something burned, his hands were shaking. Then, his phone rang. He flinched, staring at the screen. Unknown caller. His thumb hovered over the button. He didn't want to answer. But something inside him, a sick, gnawing curiosity, made him press accept. Silence. Then breathing, slow, raspy, familiar. Logan's grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? A pause. Then, Hazel's voice, I see you. The call dropped, and Logan knew with a bone-deep certainty it wasn't his mind. She was here. Hazel's descent into the abyss. Trapped in her own mind, Hazel felt something shift. A force, ancient and crawling, slithered through the cracks of reality. It was neither living nor dead, existing in the spaces between, and it had found her. The darkness around her pulsed, alive with whispers. Do you want revenge? Hazel hesitated. She felt weightless, unbound by her body, floating between past and present. Memories surged forward. Logan's fists, his words, the pain, the fear. Do you want to make him suffer? Hazel's fingers curled in the void. She couldn't move in the physical world, but here, she had power. The darkness pressed closer, wrapping around her like a second skin. She let it in, and the whispers became her own. Logan's breaking point. Logan sat on the couch, whiskey bottle clutched in his hands. He hadn't slept, couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. The power flickered again. A slow, rhythmic tap, tap, tap echoed from the hallway. Logan swallowed hard. It's not real, he muttered, but the sound continued. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps coming closer. Logan's breath hitched. The air changed, thick with something rotten. Then his phone buzzed. One new message. With shaking hands, he unlocked it. A single image loaded. A photo of his bedroom, the bed, the window, and Hazel standing in the corner, her head tilted, her eyes black voids, his stomach twisted. That photo had been taken just now. His breath came in short, panicked bursts. His body screamed at him to run, but where? There was no escaping this. The temperature dropped. His breath came out in white puffs. Then his bedroom door creaked open. Logan's hands clenched into fists. He didn't turn around. He wouldn't. The whisper came again. Closer this time. You look tired, Logan. A cold touch brushed his neck. He screamed. Hazel awakens. In the hospital, alarms blared. Nurses rushed in as Hazel's body began to convulse. Her pulse spiked. Her lips moved. A strangled whisper left her throat. One word. A name. Logan. Then her eyes snapped open, and they were as black as the void itself. Chapter 3. The haunting begins. The darkness closes in. Logan was losing time. He didn't know when he last slept, when he last ate, when he last felt like himself. Everything was wrong. The apartment felt smaller, walls pressing in, air thick with something unseen. His own reflection in the bathroom mirror had started to look unfamiliar, like a man wearing his skin, but not quite him. And the whispers never stopped. Hazel's voice, soft, everywhere. You don't look so good, Logan. He spun around, expecting her to be there. But there was only the empty apartment, bathed in flickering yellow light. He was going insane. He had to be. But if that was true, why did he hear her footsteps at night? Why did his bedroom door creak open on its own? Why did the TV screen flicker to life at 3 a.m., showing static that shifted, stretched, and, for just a second, formed Hazel's face grinning back at him? Something was in here with him, and it was getting closer. The scratches on the walls. It started small. A single, thin scratch on the wall near the bedroom door. Logan noticed it one morning, rubbing his eyes, head pounding from a night of restless sleep. He frowned, running his fingers over the jagged groove. He didn't remember making it. By evening, there were more. 3, then 5. Then an entire set of claw-like scratches carved into the drywall. They weren't random. They formed letters. Hazel. His stomach dropped. His breath came in short gasps. Not real, he muttered, backing away. Not real, not real, not real. Then, his phone rang. He jumped, nearly dropping it. The screen glowed eerily in the dark. Unknown caller. His hand trembled as he answered. A crackling silence filled his ear. Then, her voice. Did you miss me? Logan threw the phone across the room. It smashed against the wall, screen shattering, and the apartment went dark. A gust of freezing wind rushed past him. The temperature plummeted. His breath came out in white puffs. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. He turned toward his bedroom door. It stood slightly ajar. A shadow shifted just beyond it. Something was in there, and it was waiting for him to come closer. The past resurfaces. Logan didn't move. He didn't breathe. Then, his bedroom light flickered on. A low whisper seeped through the doorframe. Hazel's voice, but wrong. Layered with something else. Something ancient. You can't run from me. His body moved before he could think. He bolted for the front door, yanking it open, and froze. The hallway outside his apartment was gone. In its place was another room, and he knew it too well. His childhood bedroom. The same pale blue walls, the same creaky twin bed, the same window that overlooked a street that no longer existed. His chest tightened. His vision blurred at the edges. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But when he stepped forward, the floor creaked beneath his weight. This was the room where he first learned what fear tasted like, where he hid under the covers while his father's drunken shouts filled the house, where he first saw the shadows move when no one was there. where he realized that monsters weren't always hiding under the bed. Sometimes they wore a human face, like his own. The things that creep in the dark. A chill ran down Logan's spine. He turned slowly, afraid of what he might see. And there, on the bed, sat a boy, no more than 7. Logan's stomach dropped, because he knew that face. It was his own. The boy stared up at him, eyes wide, lips slightly parted in a silent plea. His tiny hands clutched a stuffed bear, the fur worn and faded. Then he spoke. "Why did you do it?" Logan's breath hitched. The boy's face contorted. His lips twisted, his eyes darkened, his small fingers dug into his own skin. "Why did you hurt her?" Logan stumbled backward, heart pounding. "This isn't real. You're not real." The boy tilted his head. "Neither is she." Then, the light bulb overhead exploded. Darkness swallowed the room, a rush of cold air, a whisper in his ear. "Run." Logan did. The haunting intensifies. He stumbled back into the apartment, slamming the door shut behind him. His chest heaved. His skin was damp with sweat. Silence. Then, the bedroom door creaked open again. His pulse hammered. A shape stood in the doorway. Hazel. But not Hazel. Her body was wrong. Too still, too stretched. Her limbs slightly off. Her eyes were endless voids, her mouth curling into an unnatural, jagged grin. And her voice, when she spoke, was layered with echoes of every scream she had ever swallowed. "Did you think I'd just let you go?"